Ladies and gentlemen, welcome along to another episode of EOTT, Everything on the Table, with me, Jimmy James. And I would usually say it's a pleasure to share a conversation with you. And whilst it is a pleasure to connect with Melanie, unfortunately, it brings me no pleasure to share this conversation with you, ladies and gentlemen. But it is something I think is essential and is something dear to my heart. So we're joined today by Melanie Leahy. Melanie, how are you, lovely?
I'm all right, Jimmy. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, my absolute pleasure, lovely, my absolute pleasure. And as I said, it's unfortunately a bit of a tragic story. You lost your son, Matthew, beautiful young man, 20 years old, needlessly and before his time. So do you want to give us a little bit of background of what the situation was, and perhaps we can go a bit further into the history and whatnot, Melanie? Would that be all right?
Yeah, it'd be fine, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so Matthew, my son, died when he was 20. He'd had his normal upbringing and normal schooling, normal adolescent problems. Yet by about 18, he started having depression, sleeping issues. He went to the doctor, who gave him sleeping pills, and then it ended up escalating to he was hallucinating. So he ended up being taken in and sectioned under the Mental Health Act. In 2011, he spent 5 months in hospital. He came out a zombie. He had been medicated to the hill, and it turns out that the medication there'd been an error. So where he was initially being given 25 milligram injections of risperidone, they'd been up to 37.5. So he was just a mess, shuffling, dribbling, bad nightmares, back pain. Took him to the doctor, who had no records whatsoever that Matthew had even been in hospital, but said, yeah, clearly he's had too much. So he was taken off the meds. Consequently, obviously he needed to be on something, so we thought. But because of how bad he'd felt, he refused to have any more medication. So that was November 11. By January, February, March, you could see there was a decline. He wasn't looking after himself. We asked for assessments, ended up having 5 mental health assessments before we finally got help for our son the following year, November 2012, where he got admitted to hospital. And 7 days after that admittance, our son was being removed on a trolley dead. So all intents and purposes, yes, he was found hanging. Matthew's hung himself. However, day 3 of his admission, he had called home to say he was being drugged and raped on the ward. We were advised not to see him for the 7 days. So literally, yes, he was so distressed, but we said, call the police. He called the police. They went to the ward. They deemed him no mental capacity. It turns out they didn't do any examination, although Matthew had said he wanted to be examined. They didn't seize his clothes. They didn't take any swabs. Didn't even call us to ask our permission. We were told, I called the ward and was told he was in art class. Anyway, the post-mortem reveals the date rape drug, GHB, in his system, needle wounds, 5 needle wounds in his groin, which was to date, 7 years on, we don't know where they came from. He had bruises above both ankles, blood in his stomach. And I've been fighting ever since. So there's been numerous police investigations. There's been internal investigations by the trust, which it's taken 4.5 years to prove they weren't worth the paper they were written on. So paperwork was falsified after he died, defibrillator destroyed, police destroyed the ligature. So it's just been a mess. So hence I'm here. I'm calling for a public inquiry to look into all the failings and try and find out and establish what actually did happen in those final 7 days. And I'm having to do it through a petition through the British government. So I'm here to ask anyone, UK citizen, to sign it. And it's found at www.signthepetition.co.uk. Once you sign it, please share it. I've got something like 47,000 signatures needed. I have 53,000 at the moment. I need to find another 47,000 in the next just under 4 weeks. So it's a big ask, but it's doable if people sign and pass it on.
Thank
That's
you,
the long
Melanie.
and short
Appreciate
of it,
that.
really.
Yeah, in a nutshell, and thank you very much
Mm.
for sharing that, Melanie. And just absolutely tragic, it's a mother's worst nightmare, isn't it? To see your son's health decline, and just that in itself is a devastating kind of situation to be in, and all the rest of it. And just to be frank with you, Melanie, it's just horrific. As I said to you before we started recording, I've served 7 years in prison, seen multiple needless deaths, spent,
Mm.
the 6 days in the Royal Glamorgan intensive care unit when I was sectioned, and the conditions were just appalling. I can only empathise, my lovely, and I can't imagine
Well,
what it must have been like, for Matthew to be saying those things, and then,
yeah.
the police, these
It's-
people are supposed to be, if the shoe was on the other foot, God forbid, and an accusation was put against Matthew or myself or anyone, your feet don't touch the ground. You're arrested, you're in, you're swabbed, and all the rest of it. But and they said that he had no mental capacity to even uphold any complaints when they went
But
there.
this is the crux. They hadn't done a mental health assessment. They hadn't
Right.
done a mental capacity assessment. So they just listened to staff. And Matthew's not alone. I've worked with other families. We got to another 7 patients, all saying they'd been sexually abused and raped, and it's just been put to bed. Mental health patients aren't listened to. They aren't believed. They're making it all up. Well, I'm sorry. I've seen signs, and I've seen recordings. I've seen the grooming that's been going on, and it does happen. It's rife in these establishments, and we have to shout and try and make it stop. The
100%.
safety issues, like I don't believe that Matthew died the way I've been told, but if he had done, we got together with other families, and their loved ones had died in very similar means, and I don't think they believe that their loved one died the way that they've been told. But I was told he was hanging from a door hinge in the back of the bedroom. This was in 2012. They were told in 2004, after a patient died, to remove those door hinges, and did nothing. And then there's been numerous deaths since. So I got it to 25 by the same means, going back to 2000. And currently there's a health and safety investigation still going on, which started in July 16. And maybe next year we might hear whether they're going to prosecute or not. But if someone manages to die by certain means and recommendations are put in place, then those recommendations should be done, and they hadn't been. And even after Matthew died, 2015, I was told by my MP, the CQC, and the trust themselves, January 15, I have letters to say all the recommendations made after Matthew's death were put in place. And yet another boy dies in February 15, and another one in the May. And when the inspectors went in to check, the recommendations hadn't been put in place and the changes hadn't been made. So, for me, that's criminal. And yet there's
100%.
no accountability.
This is the problem, unfortunately. There is no accountability. And as we know, these, inquiries and inquests and all that, often they whitewash, especially when there is suspicion upon people who are working within the establishment. They all work together, they all stick together, they all look after each other, they all cover each other's backs.
Yes.
On a bit of a darker note, and I'm sorry to get into this, but you will have, as you've just briefly kind of alluded to this, since this has happened, you've probably discovered lots of things that you were unaware of that have gone on in the system. And
Well, I mean, yeah, the inquest was 2 years after Matthew's death, and it wasn't until after the inquest that things come to light, and then whistleblowers came to talk to me and to give me information, because a lot of people are scared to actually spill the beans because they lose their jobs, and sure
yes,
enough, a couple have lost their jobs, and they got ridiculed and abused by other staff for sulking. But God bless them. I thank them for coming forward, because unless the whistleblowers do have the balls to do that, there's no learning and people will continue to die. And when you were saying about the same situation in prison, well, I don't know if it's the same in your area, but where I live, the trust that were looking after my son, they also look after the prison services. Chelmsford Prison, it has the highest suicide rate, I think, in the country. And it's just that they're moving the staff that are failing in one area into another area.
that's what they do
So
with the
of course,
police. Yeah, brilliant.
the same thing will continue to happen. And sadly, even when the nurse is made accountable and they lose their pin and struck off, they can still go as a carer or a healthcare assistant and still go
Yeah.
and work with other people.
Third-party
And
companies, right?
it's all wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. We're getting numerous staff. They're doing one-to-one watches on patients, and patients are sending in photographs of them fast asleep. And then they're
Yeah.
wondering why people are dying on a one-to-one suicide watch.
Yeah.
You know, and I even had one young lady on a 2-to-1 suicide watch. So she had 2 staff watching her, and yet she still managed to almost kill herself with overdose. So she'd hidden pills in her sock. Because, you know, if you're feeling like that, you will go to extremes to hide stuff. She hadn't been searched, and the 2 of them were just merrily chatting away or on their Facebook, and she was there dying in her bed. You know, and you think, yeah,
That's
it's
tragic,
not right.
isn't it? It's
It's
not.
not right, especially when someone's in a place of safety to keep them safe. That's what should be happening. You know, and
I think it's
families,
safe to say, Melanie, sorry to interject there, but I think it's safe to say
right?
that these are not places of safety. Certainly wasn't a place of
No,
safety in my experience.
they're not.
Just god-awful hellholes, you know, and
Yeah,
these are when people are at their most, you know, times of crisis, you know. Mental health
yeah.
is all kind of, is as a result of kind of society and, you know, where we've been led by the government and all the rest of it. How high have you been able to kind of take this with regards to, you said you've spoken to your MP. My experience is they're
Well,
as much used as a chocolate teapot MPs, you know, they're not much use, to be fair. Have you been able to take it higher with regards to raising awareness and people in positions, you know, down in street
yes,
these kind of things, for example?
I was in Parliament last week, and they were discussing the report that they'd published into Matthew's death and all the failings. That is being sent across the NHS now. Um, I went and met with Claire Murdoch, who's the head of NHS England Mental Health, and she was quite shocked that one of her senior managers was actually, that she employs under her trust, was actually one of the senior staff that falsified my son's care plan after his death. So, you know, a good thing that's come of this is that they're now tightening their employment procedures, and if someone does have some sort of thing, you know, that they've been guilty of, that it will, their employment will be flagged to senior staff before, you know, to be discussed and
Yeah.
looked at. Um, but I can't believe it wasn't in place before, that they didn't
Well,
properly
this is
vet
it.
people. Yeah, and you know, um, so that, you know, things are happening slowly. But for me to get my answers at the moment, I need a public inquiry. So the staff have never been interviewed under caution. Police have never spoken to other patients on the ward and interviewed them under caution. And so I'm calling for this statutory public inquiry where people will have to talk under oath. We know they've lied in the coroner's court, and I've pushed for perjury. And the police just say, well, they could have forgotten, they could have, you know, but an inquest, someone can say, can't remember, don't
Yeah.
know, and not incriminate themselves. So although I have enough information for a new inquest, um, I really don't want to go that route and be lied to.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you said, you've got 53 there, and I'll endeavour to do my best, and I'll share it on my channel, and I'll share it in as many different groups as I can, because you know, this is, you would have been well within your rights, Melanie, to just, you know, grieve in silence and in privacy, and just, you know, go on and do your own thing. And bless you for having the you know, the wherewithal to come out and do this kind of stuff and try and raise awareness for people to
I'm
come
not
afterwards.
unique. Matthew's death isn't
No,
unique.
I know.
There's thousands that have died,
Yeah,
and you know the messages of support I'm getting from parents that have lost their kids in the same system, and they were that broken they couldn't continue.
yeah.
And I'll do it for every single one of them.
Bless you, bless you, bless you. Yeah, because, you know, I can't, I don't have children, so I can't even begin to imagine, you know. And it's, as they say, it's one of the worst things that can possibly, you know, a person can go through. And with regards to the medication, again, something I witnessed, you know, people being given unbelievably large doses. My one friend was given 1,600 milligrams of quetiapine a day. How can, these are supposed to be doctors, these are supposed to be GPs, these are supposed to be
Well,
healthcare professionals, so-called. What was it?
since
I
I've
know.
it's
Sorry, no, I won't
well,
mention their name, but I've somebody I know who gets regular risperidone rejections, and I will have to find out how much they're on. But when you kind of went to the doctor, what was he saying with regards to this? Because risperidone is a very extreme. It's an antipsychotic injection, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, since I've had all this paperwork back, and I'm actually working with the girl at the moment. Matthew never had a mental illness all his life, and obviously this problem started. So he was given this Zopiclone drug. When I've looked back, so the Zopiclone is a sleeping pill.
Well, that becomes horrible.
Well, the paperwork says no more than 4 weeks. Now the trust says no more than 2 weeks. He was on it long term. So was two other lads that I've looked at their records long term. Long term use, side effects, hallucinations, muscle spasms, because it is a muscle relaxant. All the signals that Matthew was saying when he went to the doctors, having these muscle spasms, having these hallucinations, I think was caused by that. But then we go further forward. When he had his first admission, the first psychiatrist did blood tests, and he picked up June, July, August that Matthew's vitamin B12 was very low, overactive thyroid and low folate, possible celiac disease. Now, from working with a girl that's been talking about B12, that can cause psychosis, having those lower levels, a bit like a bladder infection in an old person can cause
Okay, right.
So the first doctor started treating him that and giving him B12. By August, they'd stopped it, and by November, it's picked up his B12 was even lower than when he first had the admission. But a new psychiatrist took over his care and stopped any vitamins, stopped any blood tests, and the next thing you know was these risperidone. So he had those injections come off it. The 7-day admission, paperwork says, what paperwork there was says, et well, et well, et well, and even on the day that he died, et well. There was no food in my son's stomach. He'd lost masses of weight. He had blood in his stomach. Yet they had been pumping him full of haloperidol all that week, diazepam, procyclide or something, which is to stop the tremor effect of what the antipsychotic causes. He had a cocktail of medication in his body and no food.
Cocktail's the word.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, they gave me haloperidol once, and that with the you know the tests for the lack of vitamins, and then sort of straight on to another antipsychotic injection. It makes you wonder, what is this by design? What these people are doing? To my mind, it is. Unfortunately, I have to say it as I see it and how I found it and how I see it. It's just by design. These people are not here for our well-being. They really aren't.
There's no care, no therapies, no talking therapies, you know, and sometimes that's all people need. Just someone to talk to them and talk through the situation, not just pump them full of meds and leave them in the room and ignore them.
Yeah, well, I went to, and again, this, it pales in significance to Matthew's case, obviously, but I'm just giving you, my experience of, I was sectioned for 6 days, and then took to prison and kept in solitary confinement for 2 months. 2 months solitary confinement, someone who's just been sectioned. Where's the care there? Where's the, absolutely none whatsoever.
No, and we're hearing now there's a young girl, her father's really fighting for her. She's stuck in 4 walls with a little flap at the front where they can just give her food. And she said, I'd rather be in prison. She said, at least I get an hour a day in the garden, or,
Yeah,
and
57 days I think we're outside for. Horrible.
She's a kid that's being restrained constantly, injected. And you just think there's got to be more that can be done for her.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful.
Yeah.
So the coroner's report then said there was, did you say GHB in his system?
The post-mortem.
The post-mortem. So clearly GHB is, we'll just call it a street drug then, if you want to call it that. It's not something that would have been able to be given to him legitimately, obviously.
Well, I mean, you told me that the post-mortem was done 5 days after death, and they're trying to tell me that the GHB was formed by the body after death as it decomposes. Well, really? He was in the freezer, and it's different levels in the blood to the urine. Not massively high, but, it was a few days beforehand, and I know GHB comes out of the system very, very quickly.
Okay.
But to this day, where did the needle wounds come from?
I was coming on to that. Yeah, needle wounds, and it's, forgive me, I hope I'm not being too personal, but were they separate puncture wounds?
I don't know. I haven't. Okay. They didn't take any photographs. They didn't show me. It was just reported 4, possibly 5 needle wounds in his groin.
God, what to even make of that? You know, it's just.
You know, and there's no way Matthew would have willingly let a needle near to him because he was paranoid of needles. You know.
Yeah.
He wouldn't let it. I took him to the doctor probably 6 weeks before this happened, and he'd got glass in his foot, and they said, we want to give you a tetanus, and there was no way they were going to give him a tetanus. You know, it's all documented. He had a fear of needles.
Yeah, it's just we are up against it. We are up against it, and a lot of stuff needs to change. And this is kind of you know, something that we can do as a starting point of just more raising awareness, really, because I think.
Well, I'd like to just say to families, if you know, if it gets to that stage where your loved one has to go to hospital, that you don't give them a week to sit on the ward. You go there every day. You ask staff. You monitor if there's anything that's marks on the body that you know you're not sure. Take photographs, keep evidence, record meetings, ask to see the care plan, and have a very proactive approach to that care, and listen to what your loved one is telling you, because you know the trouble is sometimes it's so extreme that even the families don't believe it.
This is it. Yeah, it is unfortunate. I was just going to say, you know, it is unavoidable sometimes. I do feel from just what I've observed is some people are quick to kind of jump to the option of kind of sectioning and hospitalization when, you know, in actual fact, it should be a very, very last resort. But obviously sometimes it does come to a situation where it's cause of concern, either for themselves or for they're going to harm them. Generally, with mental health, people will harm themselves before, you know, they'll harm anyone else. But as you say, yeah, it's, you know, even with Matthew having the family there, the support, the monitoring, this situation still occurred. And I just remember there were people in the hospital.
He didn't have the family there because we were told to stay away.
Oh, no, but sorry, forgive me. What I meant was you were trying, though. You were making the efforts to try, and they were pushing you away and not allowing you access, which, again, they did the same to my partner and my mother. They just wouldn't allow them any access. And it just made me wonder, there were people in there who, as far as I could see, had nobody. And I just thought these are the people who really do, excuse me, slip through the cracks, you know, and it's not just, you know, there's so many people who I think just go into that system and they just disappear, unfortunately. And
and of course, any time spent on a ward like that as well, people that have never self-done before will learn behaviour.
This is it.
And come out, you know, they'll come out worse than they went in.
It's such low energy places, these and they're often built on, and I don't, you know, some people might not be into this kind of stuff, but they are all built on ley lines and energetic places and stuff. This is kind of stuff that's come across my path during my research, and such negative energy. And as you say, that learned behavior and influence, and just being around people with ill mental health can actually influence people and bring on even worse states. You know, putting people, bunching them all together is just really a helpful way to do things. I personally don't think it is, but
I don't think so. I think there needs a big radical shake-up, and if what I'm doing can help towards that, so people sign the petition.co.uk. Find it, please.
I will. I'll put the link on the description box. It'll be straight there for people to see. And who have you been speaking to recently, Melanie? I think I noticed. Did you speak to the guys at UK? I forget what they call it.
Wake Up UK.
Wake Up UK. That's right.
Yeah. And they're trying to put out stories to try and, you know, make people aware. And to be fair, had I not obviously had a son with a problem, I wouldn't have been aware of half what's going on. And
this is it.
Unless you get involved, so you know, it can happen to anyone at any time, and you need to be aware that these things are happening. And
mental health affects all of us, whether directly or indirectly, as you say. And a lot of the time, it isn't until a tragedy occurs or, you know, extreme circumstances occur that people become aware of situations. And it's a little bit like seeing behind the curtain, isn't it, of the actual reality of what these things are. People think that, you know,
we're all busy in our lives, getting on with our lives, and then, you know, it's not until something goes wrong. It's like someone getting cancer. You don't know about radiotherapy and chemotherapy unless you get into that circle.
Exactly.
So it's a similar thing. So
Exactly, exactly. Well, Melanie, I really do appreciate you coming and speaking with me. As I said, I will endeavour to do my best to raise awareness of this situation and get this out there. I'm not going to put it as an episode, which would just essentially mean it would be delayed in going out. I'm going to get my editor, Drew, to edit this quickly and get it straight out as an off-the-cuff episode because, you know, time is of the essence, isn't it? As you say, you need 47 still, is it?
I know we're going up, but it's
No, fair play. So you're over the hill, as they say, with regards to the numbers. So let's get this.
I'm hoping it'll be quicker going down, but we'll see.
Well, let's hope so, lovely. Was there anything else you wanted to round off to or add in, lovely?
Just to say that if anyone wants to contact me, they can. I've got www.curementalhealth.co.uk is the website. To contact me, Melanie Leahy, I'm on Messenger, or I have.
I'll put all the links in the description box so people will get those messages out when we're done. Yeah.
That's it. Brilliant. Okay,
awesome.
Jim.
All right. Well, thank you, Melanie, lovely, and thank you guys for listening. Please do get over there and please do, you know, like, subscribe, and share this petition for people to get this up to 100,000. And let's, you know, make a bit of change and get something done with this. So all the best.
Okay. Thank you, love.
Thanks,
Bye
Melanie.
bye.
Cheers, love.